You point a gun at my kid again, and I swear, badge or not, I'll make sure you never breathe easy on this block again. That was me, and I meant every word. I wasn't some hothead looking for a fight, but when a man, a neighbor, pulls a gun because my son's rubber ball rolled 5 feet into his grass, something in me snapped. My name's Nate Holloway. I'm a single dad, a former firefighter, and I live in what they like to call a secure community. Well, it doesn't feel too secure when your 10-year-old gets a pistol waved at him for playing. Before we go further, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your stories too. And if you believe in standing your ground the right way, hit that subscribe button. This one's personal. Let me take you back to where it all started. It was a Sunday, sunny, quiet, almost boring. Leo, my son, was outside in the yard tossing a red ball against the side of our shed. That shed isn't just storage, it was the last thing my late wife, Camille, helped me build. Still smells like her sawdust soap sometimes. There's an old maple next to it she planted the year Leo was born. We carved our initials into its trunk, hers, mine, and eventually Leo's too. That tree has roots in this ground, same as we do. That tree is our anchor. Leo's laughter bounced through the yard, light and clear, the kind of sound you want to bottle forever. Then came the bounce too far. The ball hopped over the low fence, just a little plastic thing, and landed in Clarence Ward's yard. Now Clarence, he's the HOA's treasurer, thinks the block is his military post and the lawn his battlefield. I barely had time to stand before I heard Leo's voice say, "It's just a ball, mister." Then I heard the safety click off. Clarence had his sidearm drawn. By the time I rushed over, Clarence was standing rigid, holding that pistol like he was in a damn hostage situation. Leo's eyes were wide, silent tears. The ball sat harmless in the grass like it was waiting to be blamed. "You teach your kid to trespass?" Clarence barked. I stepped between them. "You point that thing away from my son, now." "Private property. He's lucky I gave a warning," Clarence said, lowering the gun half an inch. I didn't raise my voice, not then, but I took a step closer and said something I'd regret if I didn't. "You ever do that again? I don't care what HOA badge you hide behind. I'll bury you in paperwork and court dates till you forget what peace feels like." Clarence hesitated. The man blinked, just once, but he holstered his weapon. I scooped up the ball. Leo hadn't moved. He just looked at me, confused and scared, like he was trying to understand what he'd done wrong. That look broke something in me. That night, I called the sheriff. I filed a report. And guess what happened? Nothing, not even a visit. Turns out Clarence isn't just the treasurer, he's the HOA's enforcer. He'd been in the sheriff's hunting club for 10 years. They even shared photos on Facebook of grilling ribs and aiming bows together. The next morning, there was a notice taped to my front door. Violation 1. Grass exceeding approved height. Violation 2. Improper waste bin placement. Violation 3. Unattended minor engaging in disruptive activity. Leo was disruptive now for playing catch with a wall? I kept my cool. Barely. But I took that paper and pinned it inside the shed Camille and I built. I stared at it for a long time. And then I started a new habit, recording everything. You see, people like Clarence think they own fear. They forget some of us have wrestled with real danger, fires, smoke, death. I've held a beam off a man's spine while my shoulder cracked. I've pulled crying children out of second-story windows with smoke choking every breath. You think I'm scared of a man like Clarence? No, but I am scared of what this does to my son. And that means I'm going to fight. Not with fists, not with rage, but with strategy. And the first step? Knowing the terrain. You see, this isn't just about one incident. It's about control, power, and legacy. That maple tree, that shed, that carved bark Camille made us promise never to repaint. They stand for more than HOA bylaws. They stand for her. And I'll be damned if I let anyone erase that. By Monday morning, the neighborhood had changed. I stepped out to grab the paper and noticed it right away. The way the air felt. Rehearsed. Sprinklers clicked on like clockwork. A jogger who usually waved didn't even glance up. And Delilah Haskins was already on my lawn. "Mr. Holloway," she said, clipboard cradled in her elbow like a courtroom exhibit, "we have some housekeeping to discuss." Delilah was the kind of woman who wore her HOA badge like a sheriff's star. Every hair in place, every smile practiced. You could feel the ice beneath her pearls. I didn't invite her in. She didn't ask. "This won't take long," she said, scanning her papers like she was reading me my rights. "We've had a few complaints over the weekend. Minor, of course, but we must document all issues." She handed me a bright yellow copy. Violation 4. Tone of confrontation with HOA representative. Violation 5. Unsecured backyard items during wind advisory. Violation 6. Failure to respond to corrective action within 24 hours. I folded the paper without reading more. "You mean Clarence waving a Glock at my son? Is that on your list too?" She didn't flinch. "Clarence acted within his property rights. We've reviewed the incident. No further action required." No one from the board even talked to me. She smiled. "We have internal procedures, Mr. Holloway. I assure you, the board has it under control." The woman was gaslighting me on my own front steps. Then she leaned in slightly, her voice dropping. "This community thrives on unity. The families here, well, they value peace and order. Disruption tends to isolate people. That's not good for resale value." And there it was, not a threat, an invitation. Fall in line or become the crack in the picket fence. I didn't respond. I just turned and opened the shed door behind me. Camille's shed. Her name still etched on the inside beam. Delilah's eyes followed me to the doorway. "You may want to think about repainting that, by the way. It's beginning to look sentimental." That one stuck, sentimental. As if that was a problem. By the time she left, I had 3 more papers taped to my fence by noon. Anonymous complaints, petty stuff, noise after sunset, untrimmed tree limbs, improper basketball goal placement. We didn't even own a hoop. Leo came home from school and saw me unpinning the notices. "Did I do something wrong again?" he asked. "No, buddy," I said, kneeling next to him. "They're just scared of people who don't back down." That night, I sat on the back porch with a notebook and flashlight. I started making a list, not of violations, but patterns. Who walked where, who made eye contact, whose trash bins were spotless, and whose suddenly looked too perfect. The thing is, I'd worked 30 fires in my old life, and you learn fast what burns doesn't always start with flame. Sometimes it starts with silence. I noticed the Rothmans, 2 houses down, pulling their blinds early now. The Juergens dog, who used to bark at everything, was gone. And there were fresh HOA rules equals peace pamphlets tucked into every mailbox, except mine. The isolation was surgical, clean, suburban warfare. But I wasn't just a man under siege. I was a father, and they'd just put a target on the wrong family. So I called Liam. He picked up on the first ring. "This, about the thing you texted yesterday? You ever dealt with HOA thugs?" He laughed. "Not professionally, but I've had worse. What happened?" "I've got a neighbor with a gun, a board full of cowards, and a kid who's starting to flinch when doors close too hard. I need eyes. And a plan." "You want recon?" "I want accountability." Liam was a retired SWAT trainer. Tactical, calm, surgical with pressure. And most importantly, he believed in leverage. I hadn't told him the full story yet, but I didn't need to. He could smell the rot. "All right," he said. "I'll come by this week. Just observe first. Don't poke the bear." "I'm past poking. I'm setting the damn trap." That night, Leo came into the shed while I was organizing some boxes. He held out the red ball. "The ball, and asked if we could paint something on it, so we always know it's ours," he said. I handed him Camille's old marker pen, the one with the fading gold ink. He wrote Holloway across it in uneven block letters. I smiled. Now they really won't mistake it. I wasn't just fighting an HOA anymore. I was drawing a line, a clear, permanent one. And with Liam coming, it was only a matter of time before they realized they picked the wrong yard. The day after Leo wrote Holloway on the ball, something strange happened. Someone rolled it back. We found it resting by our steps in the morning, not tossed, not kicked, placed, the gold ink still fresh. That told me 2 things. Somebody didn't agree with what Clarence had done. Not everyone in this neighborhood was as spineless as Delilah. I knew it wasn't her. She wouldn't touch that ball with a 10-foot extension rod. And Clarence, he'd probably rather shoot it again. Later that morning, I got my first real lead. I was outside hosing down the porch when Carl Jensen approached me from the sidewalk. Longtime resident, former librarian, mid-60s, quiet type, always wore that same faded gray sweater and khakis like he stepped out of a black and white photo. He walked slow, deliberate. People usually said Carl was harmless, but today he looked burdened, like a man dragging something invisible behind him. "Morning," I offered. Carl stopped, eyes scanning the mailbox beside me. "They used to just knock, before the board." His voice was soft, aged but steady. "Now they just post fines," I replied, squeezing the nozzle shut. He shifted his weight. "You'll get more." He didn't say it like a warning, more like a fact. Then I noticed it. His hand was trembling, slight, almost imperceptible, but it wasn't the chill. It was something else. Guilt, maybe? Or fear that had lived too long in his chest. I leaned on the porch rail. "You used to be on the board, right?" He nodded. "You ever see them pull stunts like this?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and handed me a folded page, a yellowing corner of an old HOA newsletter. June 2012. On it, a smiling, younger Delilah shaking hands with a developer named Truman Goss, who I vaguely remembered had been convicted for fraud 5 years ago. She said it was community funding, Carl murmured, but it was kickbacks. The bylaws were rewritten after that deal. I didn't vote yes, but I didn't stop it either. That explained the tremor. "Why now?" I asked. Carl looked at the red ball on my step. "Because it's starting again, but this time kids are scared." And just like that, Carl turned and walked off. No explanation, no grand statement, just a soft retreat down the block like he'd exorcised a ghost that had haunted him for years. I stared at that paper for a while. Then I went back inside and pinned it next to the violation slips in the shed. It wasn't proof, not yet, but it was a crack in their polished armor. That evening, Liam arrived. He pulled up in his matte gray pickup, rolled down the window, and handed me a protein bar like we were heading into a stakeout. "Ready to observe?" "Always," I said. He didn't come in the house. We sat in the backyard under the dim porch light while Leo watched cartoons inside. "I walked the perimeter before knocking," Liam said. 3 motion sensors, 2 trail cams, and a blind spot behind your shed. Want to guess where someone's been standing recently? He pulled out his phone and swiped to a picture. A boot print, clear as daylight, right in the mulch by Camille's maple. I stared at it. Liam leaned forward. "They're not just watching. They're scouting." I swallowed hard. "They think they're untouchable." "They feel untouchable," he corrected. "Which means they've slipped up somewhere." I showed him the paper Carl gave me. He read it in silence, then nodded. "That's leverage. Not much, but it's something." We spent the next hour drawing out the neighborhood. Who lived where, who was on the board, who waved, who didn't. We weren't just mapping homes, we were mapping loyalties. "Clarence is your attack dog," Liam said. "Delilah's the brain. The rest are shadows." "And Carl's your witness, whether he wants to be or not." As he packed up to leave, I glanced at the red ball again. That little rubber globe had seen more diplomacy than the entire HOA board. Before Liam got in his truck, he paused. "You know what your biggest advantage is?" "What?" "Maybe they think you're still playing defense." I smiled. "That'll change." Because after Carl's visit, I wasn't just defending memories anymore. I was exposing rot. And the first crack had already formed. That night, after Liam left, I stayed up tracing our notes again under the dim bulb in the shed. I wasn't looking for patterns anymore. I was building a case. They thought they could drown me in silence, but silence, when logged and cross-referenced, becomes evidence. By morning, a new escalation was already waiting for me. Someone had installed a temporary chain-link fence around Clarence's property line. Not just a border. It was padded with industrial no trespassing signs, 1 every 4 feet. Bright red, freshly bolted. And dead in the center, a laminated placard. "This property is protected by armed response." Leo stood beside me at the curb, eyes wide. "Is that because of me?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just knelt beside him, handed him the ball, and said, "Go inside and draw me the weirdest robot you can imagine." He nodded and sprinted back up the steps. Then I took a picture of the fence and the sign. I didn't post it, not yet. but I sent it to Liam. His reply came in seconds. He's making himself a target. Good, let him. Around noon, a black SUV with tinted windows rolled slowly past my house. It didn't stop, didn't speed, just lingered long enough for me to catch the plate. It matched the tag on Delilah's driveway from last month. She wasn't hiding anymore. At 3:00 p.m., I heard the first alarm. A motion-tiggered strobe on Clarence's yard lit up like a nightclub, right as Leo stepped near our mailbox. The kid didn't even cross the property line. The alarm sounded like a prison lockdown. I stormed out and unplugged the cable running from Clarence Hedges to the solar battery he'd hidden behind a fake rock. Clarence stepped outside. "You just tampered with private property." "No, I disabled a security measure aimed at a child." He sneered. "Maybe if you controlled your brat." I took a step forward. "Say it again." He hesitated, then did something odd. He looked past me, to Camille's maple tree, just for a second. Then he turned and walked back inside without another word. It didn't feel like a victory, it felt like a warning. That evening I got a knock, not a board member this time, Mr. Kelson, the community's landscaper. "I shouldn't be here," he whispered, "but I need to show you something." He handed me a folded note and pointed toward the common grounds near the tennis courts. "There's an old breaker box back there. It's been rewired, lights, cameras, not HOA standard." I unfolded the paper, a wiring schematic, hand-drawn. Someone had been modifying community infrastructure, probably to run Clarence's surveillance system without HOA approval. Kelson didn't wait for thanks, just walked off into the dusk like he hadn't even come. That night, I took Leo to my sister's house, just for a couple of days, told him it was a sleepover, told myself it was temporary. But the truth was, things were about to get uglier. Back at the house, I killed the porch lights and waited. At 11:47 p.m., the motion cam Liam installed behind the shed picked up a shadow, not a raccoon, not wind. A man. He didn't step onto the porch, didn't touch anything, just stood there facing the shed, watching. He stood for 13 minutes, then turned and walked back through the blind spot Liam mapped. I played the footage back 3 times. He didn't look at the cameras, didn't carry anything. But as he walked away, he glanced at the tree again. Same direction Clarence had looked earlier. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called Carl, asked if he remembered anything about land disputes when the neighborhood was first built. He hesitated. "There were rumors," he said slowly. "A few lots with strange boundary lines. One of them had a tree as a marker." He didn't have to say which one. That tree wasn't just Camille's legacy. It was a line, maybe legal, maybe forgotten, but someone clearly hadn't. Suddenly the lights, the alarms, the signs, the shadows, they weren't about Leo's ball. They were about the tree. And whatever it stood on was worth hiding. After Carl mentioned the rumor about the tree marking a boundary, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was buried. Maybe not physically, but somewhere in this house or neighborhood. It was nearly midnight, the house quiet, Leo still at my sister's. I walked into the shed again, lit only by the old camping lantern hanging from a rafter. The violation slips were pinned on the wall, flapping slightly from the breeze creeping through the cracks. Beneath them, the photo Carl gave me. Camille's initials carved into the beam just above it. But tonight I wasn't looking for symbols. I was looking for paperwork. Something real. Something that proved what they were hiding. And I knew just the place. The basement. Now most people think basements are for clutter. Old bikes, empty paint cans, forgotten Christmas lights. Ours? It was Camille's archive. Filing cabinets, bins, labeled folders from every remodel, every tax reassessment, every community meeting we'd ever been invited to, because that's who she was. I pulled the cord light and blinked through the dust. The air was colder down there, still and dry. I passed over the obvious folders, building permits, landscaping quotes. Then something caught my eye. A rusted green lockbox, half covered under a stack of vinyl records and a broken desk lamp. It wasn't labeled, just taped shut with Camille's handwriting across the top. Keep, never toss. The tape cracked as I peeled it off. The metal creaked like it hadn't been touched in years. Inside, old HOA newsletters. Meeting notes, handwritten in Camille's blocky cursive. And near the bottom, a plat map. Not a standard one either. This one was drawn by hand, with dotted lines, annotations, and a bold red circle around our backyard. I held it up to the light. Camille had written, "Tree planted here, matches 1974 borderline." And below it, "Delilah asked me not to mention this. You know what this is, right?" he asked. "I do, I just want to know if the county does too." Rick pulled up the parcel database, clicked through a few screens, then turned the monitor so I could see. There it was, parcel C-183, owner Paul Ross, estate. No HOA listing, no lease, no formal transfer. He looked at me slowly. "Daniel, this land never moved. The HOA built on it without ever securing the deed." "You sure?" He tapped the screen. "As sure as this database gets." For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just stared at it. All this time, they'd been fining me, threatening me, trespassing on my property, and their whole fortress was built on my family's forgotten dirt. I asked Rick for a certified copy, notarized and sealed. He printed it, stamped it, and slid it across the counter. "You planning to fight them?" he asked. I folded the paper into my folder, careful not to crease it. "No, I'm planning to invoice them." That afternoon, I walked around the HOA clubhouse. Same smug cars parked out front, same flags in the flower beds. But something about the place felt different now. I wasn't the outsider anymore. I was the landlord with a secret. I walked back home and stood in front of the sycamore, one hand resting on the old bench. The wind moved the leaves just enough to make it whisper, like it always had when Dad sat here. I could almost hear him chuckle. "Leverage, son. That's all power ever is." I turned toward the house. I had leverage now, real leverage. They wanted to play games with fake fines and empty threats? I had a deed that said game over. Imagine being fined, bullied, and harassed, only to find out the people doing it are living rent-free on your land. If you've ever felt powerless dealing with an HOA, just know this: leverage changes everything. Drop a comment if you've ever uncovered the truth behind their rules, and hit subscribe, because the real fun's about to begin. I didn't go straight for the kill. That would have been easy and short-sighted. No, this wasn't about payback anymore. It was about something deeper. Pulling the mask off a system that thought it could rewrite rules and erase people like me. Quiet ones. The ones who keep receipts. So, I waited. And I watched. I went to one more HOA meeting. This time, clipboard in hand. I didn't say a word during the first half. I just sat in the second row, flanked by retirees and new couples who barely looked up from their phones. Chad stood off to the side like usual, arms folded, eyes fixed on me. Marcia was mid-report when I raised my hand. "Apologies," I said. "Before the vote, I'd like to request access to the full ledger of dues collected this fiscal year." She blinked. "That's not part of today's agenda." "No, but it's part of state code," I said. "And unless you want me filing a Freedom of Information request, I'd prefer to settle it here." A few heads turned. Susan Dent looked up sharply, then lowered her eyes again. I saw the pen in her hand tremble slightly. She wasn't writing anything, just holding it like a lifeline. Marcia shifted in her seat. "We'll consider the request in due course." "No need," I said. "I already have a partial ledger." I didn't show it yet, just said it, let the words hang. After the meeting, people shuffled out, awkward and confused. Chad brushed past me with a shoulder bump, but this time, I didn't budge. I looked him square in the eye. "We both know what you're protecting," I said. He didn't answer, just sneered and walked out. But Susan didn't leave. She lingered by the snack table, pretending to tidy up unused napkins. I waited, didn't approach, just gave her space. Finally she turned, eyes glassy, her voice was low. "I shouldn't be talking to you." "You already did," I said. "That note helped more than you know." She looked around, no one close enough to hear. "They told us it was just a formality," she whispered, "that the dues were fine to reclassify because of incomplete processing. I didn't know they were doing it after payments posted." "But you do now?" She nodded. "They keep the real records on a separate drive, not the one used for reports. Greg handles it, Marcia signs off." I pulled out a notepad and wrote that down. "Will tell me?" I asked. Her mouth tightened. Because I've been on this board for 18 years. We used to fix potholes and organize community BBQs. Now I sit in rooms where people talk like homeowners are assets, not neighbors. I handed her a folded document from my folder. This is the deed. They built on land that belongs to my family. I haven't made that public yet. Susan looked down at it. Her hands trembled harder now. You could bury them with this. Maybe. Or I give them a chance to pay what's owed. She held the paper for a second longer before giving it back. You won't get fairness from people who only care about control. Then I'll get it through the county. She nodded once and walked away, slower than usual, like the floor might give out under her next step. Back home, I updated my files and emailed Evan. We need to talk strategy. Then I started mapping my move. The first was an anonymous tip to a friend at the local newspaper. Just a nibble, a whisper about financial irregularities in the HOA's dues system. No names, just smoke. The second was setting up a meeting with a zoning attorney. I wanted to know exactly what leverage I had over the clubhouse lease. And the third? I bought a small sign, subtle, white letters on black. Future site of Ross office, private lot under review. I staked it in the patch of grass behind the HOA clubhouse, right where their rose bushes ended and my property line began. They could find me all they wanted, but now they were trespassing. And I had receipts. The Ross office sign didn't cause chaos, at first. It started as a rumor, a few whispered questions at the mailbox cluster. One neighbor stopped me while I was trimming the hedges and asked if I was building something. I just smiled. Just asserting some property lines, I said. You'd be surprised what folks build on without checking the deed. But it didn't take long for it to reach the wrong ears. 3 days later, I got an official email from the HOA board. Subject line, unapproved signage, notice of violation. I laughed out loud. That afternoon, I printed their violation notice and taped it to the inside of my window, right above the kitchen sink. I wanted them to know I saw it and that I wasn't hiding. That same evening, Marcia came storming up the walkway. She didn't knock, just stood at the edge of the porch, arms folded. Mr. Ross, we need to speak. I opened the screen door but stayed behind it. Afraid I don't take meetings without notice anymore. HOA policy, remember? Her lips tightened. What exactly are you doing behind the clubhouse? I held up my phone and snapped a photo of her standing there. Protecting my land, I said. You know, the one your foundation's been squatting on. You're making a mockery of the board. No, I said, lowering the phone. I'm making a statement. Yours was built on my lot. Mine was built on legacy. She didn't answer, just turned and walked off, heels clacking harder than necessary. The screen door creaked as I let it close behind me. Later that night, I reviewed the footage from my security cams. One caught her pacing by the clubhouse sign, staring at my little stake in the ground. Another caught Chad walking the perimeter of my property with a flashlight. He didn't step over the line, but he circled it like a predator who couldn't find the fence opening. Let them stew. The next morning, I met with Evan and the zoning attorney, Ms. Hannah Lay. She was sharp, no nonsense, and had clearly dealt with these HOA types before. Daniel, she said, scanning the documents, you're sitting on a legal gold mine. The board has no formal lease, no easement rights, and they've likely collected dues under a structure built on land they don't own. That's not just negligence, it could be fraud. So what's my play? She leaned back. You could serve them a formal eviction notice, or lease the land back to them at a rate that makes every one of their budgets bleed. I glanced at Evan. He was smiling under his breath. I'd rather lease it, I said, let them keep their illusion of control while they cut me a check every month. Hannah nodded. We'll draft the terms, and when they refuse, because they will, you file suit. This isn't personal, it's property law. The courts won't care who likes who. That night, I sat back on the sycamore bench, folder in hand. Tommy came out with 2 mugs of cocoa. We sat without saying anything for a few minutes. The wind had started to shift. Cooler now. Fall was coming. You're really going through with this, huh? He said. I nodded. They crossed the line the second they thought I wouldn't fight back. Tommy sipped his cocoa and looked at the sign across the street. Kinda wild. They tried to fine you into silence, and now they're going to be paying you to exist. Sometimes, I said, the best revenge is just letting people pay rent on their own arrogance. We sat there, quiet, just listening to the leaves rustle. That bench had always been more than wood. It was memory, proof, grounding. And now? It was the front row seat to a trap already set. Delilah's reach was long. That very night, the motion sensors near the disturbed patch of earth I'd found earlier caught movement again. Someone was digging. But this time, I was ready. Liam and I raced outside with flashlights and cameras catching the figure in the act, face obscured, hands swift, dirt flying. The trespasser froze, then bolted toward the shadows, disappearing into the maze of backyards. We didn't chase. We didn't need to. We had them on camera. The tree, the land, the secrets, all were finally coming to light. And with Carl's confession, the silence had shattered. The quiet witness had become the key. After Carl's confession and the pile of files we'd uncovered, it felt like the game had changed. We weren't chasing shadows anymore. We had a playbook. Liam and I sat in the kitchen, maps spread across the table, the hum of the fridge filling the silence. The plat maps, the altered meeting minutes, and the recordings were our ammunition. But how do you take down a fortress built on fear and forged in secrecy? The answer was simple: expose every brick. I called our civil rights attorney, Maria. Over a grainy video call, she laid it out plainly. We build a case, but more importantly, a narrative. The public needs to see the truth. You're not just fighting for your land, you're fighting for every homeowner silenced by this corruption. Maria's words stuck with me. The battle wasn't just legal, it was psychological. Public perception was as powerful as any document. So we started gathering. I set up a secure folder online and began uploading every piece of evidence: photos of the fence, videos from the night watch, copies of violation notices, and Carl's thumb drive files. I created a timeline of events. Each small infraction, every surveillance capture, every suspicious meeting date. It was a living dossier. Liam was mapping out the HOA's moves like a chessboard. Clarence is your knight. He attacks, but he's limited. Delilah is the queen, dangerous and unpredictable. We identified weak points: neighbors who'd stayed silent but seemed uneasy, community spaces Delilah controlled, and legal loopholes she exploited. Every detail mattered. Then came the phone calls, quiet conversations with neighbors, sometimes over coffee, sometimes under the guise of casual greetings. Most nodded but said little. A few offered small pieces of insight, a rumor here, a memory there. Every whispered word added texture to the picture. One afternoon, Liam brought in an old friend, Dana, a retired city planner familiar with zoning laws and municipal records. She dove into the archives and emerged with something unexpected: documentation showing a disputed parcel of land right where our maple tree stood. The official city plans didn't match the HOA's records. We had proof that Delilah's claims weren't just unethical, they were illegal. Armed with this, Maria drafted letters demanding meetings, threatening lawsuits, and warning of public exposure. We weren't bluffing, we had the evidence, and we weren't afraid to use it. But the fight wasn't just paper and law. Late one evening, as I reviewed a recording of Delilah's recent HOA meeting, the doorbell rang. No one. Just the wind? I checked the cameras. Someone had left a package on the porch. Inside was a photo of Leo playing near the tree, taken from a distance. Clear, cold, calculated. My heart clenched. This was no longer about land or bylaws. It was intimidation aimed at my family. I called Liam immediately. "We escalate, but we protect," he said. "Time to install more cameras, motion lights, and, most importantly, keep Leo somewhere safe when the night falls." We spent the next days reinforcing our defenses, but the real weapon was our growing network, the silent allies, the documented proof, the legal firepower. One afternoon, Maria sent a message. "I've scheduled a preliminary hearing. Your HOA can't ignore this any longer." I looked out at the maple tree, the sun filtering through its leaves. This wasn't just a tree anymore. It was a beacon of truth, resilience, and justice. And I wasn't about to let it fall. The morning after Maria confirmed the preliminary hearing, the neighborhood felt different. There was a subtle shift, a ripple beneath the surface. I noticed it in the way neighbors glanced over fences, the hushed tones behind closed doors. But Delilah wasn't backing down. If anything, she went on the offensive. I came home from work to find the mailbox stuffed with more flyers, this time in glossy color with bold letters. Know Your Rights HOA Guidelines for Peaceful Living. Irony wasn't lost on me. Peaceful living except when your kid's ball crosses an invisible line and a gun is pulled. Posted one flyer on my shed, right beneath Camille's initials. Let them see it. Let them know I wasn't scared. At the community meeting that week, I made my move. I stood at the back, watching Delilah present like a practiced orator, spinning tales of community safety and protecting property values. But the murmurs from the crowd told a different story. People were listening, questioning. After the meeting, I handed out a simple flyer I'd designed with Liam's help. Your Rights Against HOA Abuse. Some neighbors took them with gratitude. Others just folded theirs and slipped them in pockets, wary but curious. The first big sign of change came from the Rothmans, the couple who'd pulled their blinds shut ever since Clarence pulled his gun. One afternoon, I saw Mr. Rothman watering his lawn, eyes meeting mine over the fence. He nodded, a silent acknowledgement that didn't require words. Small victories, but enough to feel. Then came Clarence's reaction. One evening, Liam caught Clarence lurking by the fence, fiddling with one of our motion sensors. This time Liam was ready. He flashed a bright light, startling Clarence into retreat. You're not the only ones watching, Liam growled. But Clarence wasn't the only threat. A few nights later, our porch light was smashed. The glass shattered across the steps. Whoever did it left no fingerprints, but the message was clear. We were being watched and warned. Instead of intimidation, it fueled us. I spent the next days calling neighbors, arranging small meetings over coffee or lunch. The fear was still there, but so was a growing sense of unity. Stories started to surface. Others who'd been bullied by the HOA but too scared to speak. At one such gathering, Mrs. Green, a quiet widow from 2 houses down, shared how Delilah had fined her for planting native flowers in her front yard, flowers she'd grown for decades. The stories were many, but the courage was rising. One morning, I received a call from the local news reporter, Tanya Miraz. We've been tipped off about some HOA irregularities, she said. We want to hear your story. That night, Liam and I prepared a stack of documents and videos for her. We weren't just fighting for our land anymore. This was becoming a movement. Before she left, Tanya paused by the door. People are hungry for the truth. This could get big. That word, big, felt heavy. But just when things seemed to tilt in our favor, Leo came home, upset. The community pool banned me, he said quietly. They said my family is under review. My stomach dropped. Delilah was tightening the screws. Liam and I reviewed the footage from that night. We saw Clarence near the pool gates, making phone calls, orders being given. I knew it was time to push harder. We started drafting anonymous letters to city officials and housing authorities. We posted Know Your Rights flyers on every mailbox, again, this time with a bold note at the bottom. Stand together, we're stronger than fear. Carl watched all this from his porch, a rare smile breaking through. One afternoon, as I locked up the shed, I glanced at the maple tree. Its leaves danced in the breeze. To me, it was more than a tree. It was a silent witness, a symbol of everything we were fighting for. And like lions in the grass, we were ready to pounce. Leo's suspension from the community pool hit harder than any fine or flyer. He came home from school, clutching the letter in his small hands, voice barely a whisper. Mom said I can't swim anymore. I looked at him, my son, his face a mix of confusion and hurt, and something inside snapped. This wasn't about rules or land anymore. It was personal. It was about a kid being punished for the sins of the HOA. That night, Liam and I reviewed the security footage from the pool area. There he was, Clarence, pacing near the gate, phone pressed tight to his ear, issuing orders with a cold precision. Not a hint of hesitation. We're past intimidation, Liam said, shaking his head. This is war. But we weren't backing down. We upgraded the security around the house, new cameras, motion detectors, reinforced locks. Every night, Liam and I took turns monitoring the feeds. Then, Maria called with news that felt like a lifeline. We filed a motion to expedite the hearing, she said. The judge wants to see evidence of harassment and intimidation. I shared the pool suspension letter, the footage, the damaged porch light, and the flyer campaign. We had a real shot. But Delilah wasn't idle. One afternoon, a mysterious letter arrived, unsigned, threatening legal action if I continued defaming the HOA board. The handwriting was familiar, sharp and deliberate, a warning disguised as a threat. I showed it to Liam. "Typical play," he said, "trying to scare you into silence." "Won't work," I said. That evening I walked the neighborhood again, this time with purpose. I stopped at the Rothmans, the Jurgens, even the quiet widow, Mrs. Green. I handed out copies of the unsigned letter. Their faces told me everything. Fear, yes, but also resolve. "You're not alone anymore," I told them. "We're all tired of living in shadows." The day of the expedited hearing arrived like a storm. I sat in the packed courtroom, Maria by my side, the binder of evidence heavy in my lap. Delilah and Clarence entered, faces tight, eyes darting. I took a deep breath. When my turn came, I laid out the timeline, from the gun pulled at Leo to the altered bylaws, the surveillance, the intimidation, and the pool ban. I played the audio recordings. I showed photos of the broken porch light, the fence, the tree with the disturbed earth. The judge listened, eyes steady. After hours of testimony, the judge ruled. Temporary injunction granted. The HOA must cease all punitive actions against the Holloway family pending full review. A wave of relief crashed over me. But as we left, I caught Delilah's glare, sharp, cold, and unbroken. She wasn't done. Outside, neighbors approached, silent nods, murmurs of support. The tide was turning. That night, I sat with Leo under the maple tree. He leaned against me and whispered, "Will I swim again?" I looked at the branches swaying gently, leaves rustling softly. "Yes, kid. And this time, no one will stop you." The community hall was packed, the air thick with anticipation and a murmur that swelled into uneasy whispers. After months of shadows, rumors, and whispered fears, the day had finally come. The special HOA meeting to confront the allegations I'd laid bare. I stood near the back, feeling the weight of every pair of eyes, friends, foes, and the fence-sitters. Liam was at my side, calm and steady as ever, while Carl Jensen sat quietly up front, hands folded but visibly tense. Delilah arrived last, her usual polished smile forced and brittle, like a mask slipping at the edges. Clarence followed, eyes darting nervously. The chairperson called the meeting to order, and silence fell like a curtain. I stepped forward with my laptop and the binder, my voice clear despite the pounding in my chest. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "This community is our home, our family's legacy. For months, I've witnessed actions that threaten not only my family but the principles this neighborhood was built on." I clicked and the room dimmed as a timeline appeared, photos, letters, videos, the story of harassment and deception. I played the audio first, Delilah's voice sharp and unyielding. "I don't care who owns the land, it's mine now." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Then the video of Clarence tampering with the motion sensor. I unfolded Camille's hand-drawn plat map and pointed at the disputed border. "This tree," I said, "is more than just a symbol. It marks a boundary someone tried to erase." Murmurs grew. I laid out the evidence of altered bylaws and the anonymous threats, each slide accompanied by dates and signatures. A man in the front whispered to his wife, "I had no idea." Delilah's face tightened. She raised her hand to object, but the chairperson silenced her. Carl cleared his throat and stood. "I was part of the board," he said, voice trembling but firm. "I stayed silent when I should have spoken. I'm sorry for that." He handed over an old ledger, a final piece confirming the tampering. The room shifted, the air was electric with truth breaking free. Delilah tried to speak again, but this time the crowd was no longer hers. People began voicing support for change, for transparency. Clarence stormed out, slamming the door. Delilah was left alone, cornered by the very community she tried to control. I felt the weight lift, not because the battle was over, but because the truth was finally in the open. Outside, neighbors came up, shaking my hand, offering quiet thanks. Leo, standing beside me, looked up and whispered, "Did we win?" I smiled and nodded. "We did, and we're just getting started." As the crowd dispersed, I glanced at the maple tree standing tall outside the window, its leaves glowing golden in the late afternoon sun. A silent witness to justice. The days after the meeting felt surreal, like walking through a neighborhood caught between dawn and daylight. Clarence resigned under pressure, Delilah was suspended pending a full investigation, the board was forced to accept new members, neighbors who had spent years quietly watching, now stepping forward to restore fairness. Carl Jensen was elected interim president. The man who once trembled with fear was now the neighborhood's steady hand. I saw him one afternoon tending to the flower beds near the community center, his movements slow but purposeful, a quiet dignity in his work. Liam helped me install a simple community notice board right by the entrance, bright, visible, and free of the usual HOA jargon. Instead, it carried messages about neighborhood events, reminders to respect property, and occasional notes of encouragement. No one protested its presence. At home, Leo and I spent evenings beneath the maple tree, tossing his red ball back and forth. That ball had become more than a toy, it was a symbol of resilience, a small beacon of the fight we'd fought and won. One afternoon, as Leo kicked the ball into the neighbor's yard, I held my breath, waiting for a familiar tension. But this time, the ball was gently rolled back by Mrs. Green, smiling warmly. The simple act said everything. We hadn't just reclaimed a boundary on a map, we'd reclaimed a community. As the sun dipped low, I traced my fingers over Camille's initials carved deep into the tree bark. I thought about the journey, the threats, the late nights, the friends who stood with us when silence was easier. And I knew this: justice isn't just about winning. It's about standing firm when it matters most. Protecting what's yours with heart, grit, and truth. This neighborhood, this tree, this legacy, they were all reminders that the fight was worth it. And that sometimes, the smallest ball rolling across a yard can start a revolution. I'd love to hear from you. If you've faced struggles like this, share your story in the comments. Where are you watching from? Let's build a community that sees and supports each other. Because when it comes to justice, dignity, and legacy, we're stronger together.